Good morning, everyone. This is Diana Kelly, President and CEO of Camp Cal Now, RV Park and Campground Alliance. I want to welcome everybody to this excellent webinar on fire insurance today. We get so many calls in the office about how to get fire insurance. Does anybody have any information on fire insurance? So as we get ready to head into a busy season and prepare for the upcoming fire season here in California, I thought what a better time than to bring Damian Petty from Leavitt Recreation Insurance to talk to you a little bit about fire insurance. So Damian is a commercial insurance agent and broker for Leavitt, and he specializes in anything recreational or hospitality related: RV parks, campgrounds, resorts, trampoline parks, dude ranches, family entertainment centers, and more. He primarily works out of the western portion of the country and is licensed in over 20 states. And Damian has nearly 20 years of experience in the commercial insurance area. So who better than to talk about fire insurance? Please stay on after the webinar. Fill up the chat and the Q&A with questions. I'll be sharing those towards the end. And then we also have a poll for you to take afterwards. And with that, I'm going to let Damian take it away.
Well, thank you for that. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. So things are changing pretty rapidly over the last 6 months in the insurance industry, especially for us in the campground industry. So like Diane had mentioned, I've been doing insurance for 20 some odd years, always been out here in the West. Typically forest fires are pretty, par course for everything that we do. We see them in California and Montana and Colorado and even Eastern Washington and that type of thing. But after the Paradise Valley fire there in California, that really seemed to trigger a lot of insurance companies to rethink where they want to be insuring. So we saw it in mass exodus in the homeowners arena, a lot of other industries, but I kind of considered us fairly lucky because most of our carriers were used to riding in forest fire country, and we really weren't seeing what everybody else was seeing. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what to be prepared for, and we'll go from there. But what you'll start to see and how this will impact your campground, and really want you to be prepared and planning for the future in the sense of what happens if you're one of those particular parks, but then also what happens if you're one of these parks that you don't think that you're exposed to it, and now you find yourself finding that not to be the case. And we'll kind of talk about that as well. How these wildfires are affecting the outdoor hospitality industry in general. So it's not just the campground industry. So we'll talk about that as well. And then how to be prepared and have a risk management game plan. I think this is really something that most people have never really put into writing. And that's probably where sometimes thinking the process through would be helpful. So we'll address that a little bit. And then also on that part of doing the risk management, planning and documenting it, what's your future plans? All of this kind of goes together in the sense of trying to secure the insurance for you and getting a good rate. At certain times, it feels like the rates aren't to your advantage or aren't good, but they might be better than you think. And I'm going to give you some examples of that as well. So with that being said, we'll dive right in.
Hey, Damian, can I get you to share that screen so we have at least your logo and stuff up on Facebook?
Yep, sorry, I thought I was already sharing. I apologize to you. Are we there?
We are on what you will start to see. Is that where we should be?
Yep, so we started here.
Mm-hmm.
I just reviewed what to be prepared for, just those 4 bullets.
Okay.
And then we are into the first one. So what you'll start to see. So underwriting obviously is getting tougher, with me kind of saying, hey, we really weren't impacted like most of the industry was. I felt really good over the last 2 or 3 years because we were hearing it from other sectors that, hey, they're getting non-renewed. I had a few people that had like some farm type exposures. Leavitt Recreation is part of the Leavitt Group, and we have 150 agencies, and a handful of those are in California. So kind of our sisters and brothers were hearing and seeing lots of non-renewals and really struggling in California with getting fire insurance. Well, we're starting to now see that in the campground industry. So the three primary players, big players that we're seeing is Philadelphia, K&K Insurance Company, and Arch Insurance Company. And two of those carriers, K&K and Arch, pretty much have said, hey, we don't want any property insurance in California, period. Not just if, hey, you're in fire zone or, in a certain part of California, they just don't want to write property insurance in California. So that really hurts even the parks that are in inner cities or in good fire districts or in town, because then the competition goes away and you're just left with whatever's left. So the competition, they're seeing that where nobody else is wanting to write it. But then with that being said, it makes them pause too and say, hey, do we want to stay in this industry? Why is everybody else getting out? Should we be doing the same? And so one of the things in the last 6 months was it absolutely was they were getting out. They definitely didn't want it. And now they're sort of looking back at it, potentially case by case. So it just depends on the carrier. We also saw two other big players, more in the mobile home park arena. There was King Insurance, and then there was a program called Propel or Gotham Insurance, excuse me. And both of those mobile home / RV park programs, both have gone by the wayside in the last 3 years. And those were big players for the mobile home industry, but they did do a few RV parks too. So it kind of plays in our arena here. And with all of that then being said, we typically then go to what we call the surplus lines markets. Well, the surplus lines markets are the ones that are the companies that are taking the high risk type stuff typically. Even those guys are not wanting to write in these high fire brush zones. So keeping that in mind that, hey, underwriting is getting tougher, you really got to put yourself in the underwriter's shoes, and they really want to look at the best of the best. So when we talk about that, we're talking about the claims. So when we look at your own personal claims, one of the things that I can't stress enough is right now, if you have a potential claim that you can handle on your own, in the sense that it's $1,000 or $2,000, maybe even $5,000, and this kind of depends on the size of a campground that you have. A smaller campground, a $5,000 loss could be a huge loss, where maybe one of the bigger parks, they already have a $5,000 deductible or a $10,000 deductible. But anytime you're looking at claims, if you have one or two or three claims, typically that's when the insurance underwriter would say, yeah, we're really not interested. We're going to go ahead and pass. So if you're going forward and you have the opportunity to pay for a loss out of your own pocket, I would highly, highly recommend it right now. We're in what we call a hardened market or a hard market. If you Google hard market, hard insurance market, all kinds of articles will come up telling you what's going on in the industry and how it's affecting us. So when we look at the forest fire issues, obviously in California, the insurance industry has been plagued with some pretty big losses over the last few years, bigger than I think most of them thought that they were going to have. One of the things is the projection in the future of what's going to happen. So we're kind of talking about the global warming, matter if you believe in it or not. There's a lot of reports out there. I know we have a program with Allianz Insurance Company, and they are definitely talking about global warming and potential more fire issues. And that's now even stretching up further and further into the state of Oregon and Washington, where they're really not even wanting to write even up in those parts of the world that are known to be rainforest, not really high fire brush zones. But last year was the first time we started seeing fires on the coast of Oregon. I know I live in the Puyallup, Washington area, and I had a forest fire 2 miles away from me. So it's getting people's attention. And so now they're kind of looking at this global warming saying, hey, do we want to be on any of this stuff? And that's causing all of our rates to go up. And typically the rates are driven by the reinsurance markets. So give you some examples here. I have a park in the Seattle area that was paying a 50-cent rate. They did have a claim last year. It was an electrical fire in a baseboard wall heater and caused the clubhouse to burn to the ground. They are in the thick of the forest. They're in what we call a high PC 10 class, which is the highest fire class you can get. However, it's Seattle, it's super wet, and typically we don't have a lot of forest fire issues up here. And their renewal this year, the reinsurance company said to the insurance company that we had it with, we want $2.35 for the rate. The insurance company was saying, okay, then we need a $3 rate. Mind you, they were at a 50-cent rate. So 6 times the amount for that particular park on their property insurance. Now, at least we were able to find insurance for them. In some cases, we're even running into problems where, even with that being said, the reinsurance companies or the insurance companies can't get you insurance, or they don't want to offer it to you. So if you're in one of those circumstances, then we're turning to the California Fair Plan and we're getting the insurance through them. So there's some caveats to that. They have some, surcharges that can be fairly expensive. They're gonna do an inspection. We want to try to avoid that at all costs. However, if you're in that situation, that's where we're gonna end up going for you. So at the end of the day, most of the California parks, we can definitely get you insurance. And with that being said, you got to be prepared and planning for that big rate increase, especially if you're near a forest fire that happened in the last year or two, or especially if you had a claim where you had like a business income interruption where your park was evacuated, but the park didn't burn, or if you had the actual fire burn part of your structures or part of your property. So with that hard market, now we're kind of like, okay, we got to make ourselves look really, really good. And what can we do to do that? So how are these wildfires affecting the outdoor industry? So I was talking about, the campground industry not being affected by it, but we were seeing it in the hotel industry. And unfortunately, right now, we almost don't want to be associated with them, because that's where we're getting thrown into a classification of, hey, campgrounds are in the hospitality business, and the hospitality industry is red flagged as one that they don't want to be underwriting. So you guys need to be aware that that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes, and what they don't want to cover and what they do want to cover. So when we talk about fire insurance, that's typically the one thing that everybody wants more than wind, hail, lightning, vandalism, theft, all that type of stuff. So all of that's included in a property policy when we're going to get that for you. Sometimes you can potentially exclude fire insurance if you're in a part of the world that you don't have a huge fire exposure, but you want all the other ones. You potentially could just buy the other perils, is what we call them, and potentially keep your rate down. I wouldn't recommend that, but that's something that if you're in a pinch, you could always look at. So when we talk about trying to be the best in class, one of the things that they're looking at these days is an evacuation plan. So when you come up for renewal, you definitely should have an evacuation plan. What would you do if somebody yelled fire? I find it interesting that a lot of us feel like we have a plan, but it's in our head. It's not a written out plan. With that thought process, the question is, do your staff know that? Does even your spouse know what your plan is? Most of us really don't have that out in writing and maybe educating our staff about that evacuation plan. And so the insurance companies are asking for this on a pretty normal basis. So if you want to be that park that looks better than everybody else, definitely have that evacuation plan in place. What have you done so far? What have you done so far in the sense of fire preparation? I know for years I traveled around to campgrounds, and it was amazing to me how many, especially remote, again, most of the parks that were in fire brush zones were remote, and they wouldn't have a fire extinguisher that was tagged. I would kind of come up, do a routine kind of inspection, and we would have all these fire extinguishers around the property, but they weren't tagged and updated. Those fire extinguishers should be serviced once a year and tagged. So if you're running back into town, maybe drop them off and get those serviced and make sure those are updated. What have you done to kind of show to an underwriter that, hey, we've done our best to mitigate and trim up the trees, get the fuel sources off the ground, those types of things? Have you had a meeting with the Forest Service Department and trying to eliminate or reduce the fuel load with their blessing? A lot of people in the past have always said, yeah, the Forest Service won't allow us to cut down the trees if you're in one of those types of campgrounds. With that being said, now the approach is, yeah, we definitely want to have a plan, and the Forest Service is working with a lot of people to remove trees and trying to eliminate or reduce the fire issues that we're facing. Fire departments, are you talking to your local fire department? Have you had a meeting with your fire department? What was discussed? Was it discussed that you had a water source? Where was that water source? Do they know where that water source is at? What kind of equipment do they have? What type of equipment do you maybe have? Is that a trash pump and 100-foot of hose where you know if they roll into your campground, they can tie into your system, or can you help, beat back the fire a little bit until they get there? What might be the circumstances there? Have that meaning, what's discussed, and again, having that in a written format that we can then turn around and send that to an insurance underwriter and say, hey, we have had this meeting, we have done the mitigation, we have had the conference call with the fire department, we do have the evacuation plan, just makes you best in class, and they really understand that you have taken the extra steps, and you're not just kind of turning a blind eye to it. And that's one of the things that I've seen over the years, that we all kind of think that it can't happen to us. I just talked to a park near McLeod, and they were like, hey, we're in town, we're not going to have a problem. But all the way around them, they have huge forests. And if the forest fire comes, it could wipe out the town. Or even if the forest fire doesn't even get to town, we still might have the evacuation, which then still triggers a business income loss that the insurance company is paying for. So those are the types of things that, hey, are outside of our control, and we can't really do a lot about it. But at least you've put the thought process in of, hey, this is something that we have done, we have thought about it, we've worked with our community leaders, and this is what we would do in the case of a fire. The other things that, when we talk about not just mitigation for fires, but have you done other risk management things? Like I had mentioned, the one park that I had up here in the Seattle area, the fire started with a 40-year-old baseboard heater, and it just was arcing. So that's kind of where you start looking at those kinds of things and saying, okay, if your buildings are 20 or 30 years old, are you documenting when you guys updated the electrical, the plumbing, the heating, the roofing, those types of things, and letting the underwriter know that, hey, we did update all the wiring in the walls when we remodeled the bathhouse. Hey, we have minor electrical in the shop building. It's exposed Romex, and we know that it's copper Romex wire and not aluminum. And kind of letting people know that information is typically where we just don't get that feedback from people. So we can't go show you in the best light. The other things like tree limbs coming down on rigs. This is a huge issue within the RV park industry because we have windstorms, Mother Nature at its best. We want the trees, but we still have to attend to the trees. So do you have a tree maintenance program into place? Again, another park that I was working on just this month had called me and said, hey, just FYI, we put your tree maintenance program into play, and we hired a certified arborist to come out, and we were a little shocked. He goes, our park is now totally different. He goes, we took down over 100 trees. He goes, all look to be good and healthy. He goes, we've hired local tree guys over the years to come in and take a tree down here and there. But we've never hired a certified guy to come in and look at our trees. And he goes, sure enough, we had tons and tons of bad trees. And he goes, so we've spent thousands of dollars to knock those trees down and get them down. He goes, but I'll tell you what, he goes, at first I was doing it just for the insurance. He goes, but now that I know that I've had somebody out here, he goes, I truly am sleeping better knowing that I really don't have a risk of some big, huge tree crushing a rig and killing a family. So that hit home with me, just to get that feedback, to the point where I even called the underwriter that's on that particular account. It's not their renewal time at this time of year. And I just said, hey, I want you to know that this guy was really thankful that we've been pushing for the tree mitigation. And I just wanted to pass that on to you, that it was really him that has been kind of harping on all of us to do it. And so that underwriter even said, hey, I appreciate you reaching back out, letting us know kind of the results of that. So when that comes to you guys of trying to put that into place, think about that on what you can do to show yourself in the best light. The other one, our number one type of claim is trip and falls. So when we talk about trip and fall type claims, we tend to just walk through our campground and maybe not pay attention to those, or we get used to them. So I would say, hey, go out with a fresh pair of eyes and look for the trip and fall zones, and then try to fix those types of things. But with that being said, there are some documentations that you can do, like, hey, we noticed on such and such day that we had a trip and fall issue. Maybe it's a stair that was loose, or a stair that was tilted back or forward, causing people to potentially trip and fall. Maybe it's on your gravel pathway that, hey, we had a little like gopher hole or a dip that we could take out, or maybe we had a tree root, or maybe uneven concrete. All those kinds of things of, hey, we noticed them, and now we're putting a plan into place to address those issues, are all the things that we should then be documenting, and we can provide to the insurance carrier, like, hey, we really are trying to do our best to avoid these types of claims and these kinds of accidents. We hear you. I think that goes a long way for somebody to say, okay, we're going to get on this particular risk more than any other one, just because we know these people are taking the extra effort to mitigate claims. So that kind of sums up having a risk management plan. Um, with that being said, documenting it is key. It's one thing to say, hey, yeah, we went around and did a trip and fall assessment and we addressed those issues, Damian, thanks, and dropping an email to me and saying a one-line kind of email, yes, we did a trip and fall assessment. That doesn't go as far as an actual report, maybe showing pictures, showing where you addressed it, how you addressed it. And we're not looking to give you a ton of extra homework. But I think part of that is just demonstrating that, hey, we had some thought behind what we were doing. Also, when it's in writing, it tends to get taken care of. Your employees or your staff can also see that and say, hey, we see that we have a written trip and fall hazard assessment plan. And if we see it, we have a way to report it. And we know that it's important to the owners that we address it. So if we're out and about and we see it, we're going to report it to them. They're going to document it. We're then going to address that trip and fall issue or tree issue or whatever it might be. When you talk to your staff and you have your safety meetings, if you're in the construction industry, they have safety meetings daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually. And then they talk about who's in attendance and what was the conversation of the day. So this is stuff that we can kind of learn from of should we be doing something similar in the campground industry, especially in these hard market times, because that's what's really mattering to the insurance underwriters. In a soft market, when we have 20 different insurance companies all fighting for your business, all willing to cut the price to get your business, that's where the underwriting kind of goes away to a certain degree, or they're not as honed in on all these different things. But right now, that's what's going to win you the best premium. So if you can log it and have the inspections, and this can be your maintenance inspections, maybe it's your vehicle inspections. This could be your lawnmower inspections. We get a lot of times like rocks thrown up on rigs, breaking windows, that type of thing. It can be like, hey, we do a maintenance check on our lawnmowers and make sure all the guards and the shields are operating properly. We don't have them tied back with a coat hanger so that we can mow grass faster because we know that we're going to throw a rock potentially. Those are the types of things that we want to see. If you're using contractors, are you getting their insurance? Are you making sure that you have a proof of insurance from them? A certificate of insurance is what we call it, listing your park as additional insured. If you are contracting out those services, what are they doing from a risk management safety point? You can ask them those questions. And then all of that information, getting that back to us, the insurance agent, so that we can then go put you in the best light is super helpful. I don't get enough of that feedback from people. So we encourage it. If we can help you with that documentation, we have lots and lots of sample documentation. Just let us know what you would like to see, and potentially we have something that we can just pull and give to you as an example. I'll throw one out there, like an injury log. If somebody gets hurt on your property, do you have an injury log? Well, if you don't, call me and we'll send it over to you. We have a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet, Word document, where you can then take that, manipulate it any way you want. And all it is Johnny got hurt on such and such day, scuffed knee, or hey, he said he was okay, not a problem. Well, where that comes back is tomorrow, if we have another claim, and let's say somebody else says that they got hurt, we can go back to that injury log and say, yep, we knew about it. And they said that they were okay and refused care. And it was our administrator that actually talked to them, or it was the owner, or, it was the front gate person. And now we can go and talk to that particular person about what happened on that day. Lots of times we get the lawsuit and we have nothing to turn back on. It's all memory, it's all recollection. We just recently had one in Colorado where the guy said, yeah, I remember talking to the guy back in July. The guy was upset that the campground owner just didn't take the extra time and give him the TLC that he felt that he needed. And part of that, I kind of look at it like it was the week after 4th of July weekend. I'm sure they were busy, and it sounded like the guy was okay. But he really didn't document it. He didn't feel like he got the attention. He was like, you guys didn't even do an incident report. And so therefore, that's where the attorneys now are coming back and saying, yeah, he was hurt and you guys knew about it and didn't do anything about it. So trying to gather that information on all these different topics is not easy. But right now, with what we're seeing in the market, if you have that stuff, it really goes a long way. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to just lots of questions. Typically, I got all kinds of things coming from different angles. So I'll just open it up to you guys and let you ask questions.
Damian, I really want to thank you for this. It's a great presentation, and it brings a lot of things to mind, in terms of responsibilities for the RV park owner and operator. But I was really happy to hear you say that you do have some, some things in place, documentation and things like that, that they don't have to start from scratch or create something, from new. Also, the interesting part about the trees. I don't know if you were aware, but we had a webinar on trees from A+ Tree just 2 weeks ago, and super interesting. Everybody that attended said that they walked out and realized how many trees they had issues with, and the importance of actually having somebody come out and that documentation. So if anybody is interested in that webinar, we're certainly happy to provide that for you. But if there's any questions at the moment, happy to share them. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I will get to those, and we'll get some questions over here to Damian. First question is, when these proactive measures are taken, such as a trip and fall inspections, do you expect that lower premiums can be expected at renewal, or do these proactive measures just reduce the likelihood of a non-renewal?
So typically it wouldn't, okay, so let's look at it a different way. Normally you're not going to get a non-renewal for not having that type of thing in place. Now, if you've had claims and they were all trip and fall related, and now an insurance company is wanting to non-renew you, but you've now implemented that and gone around and addressed it, that might prevent a non-renewal. Now, on the other side of things too, like right now, we're seeing pretty regularly where we have 10, 15, and 20%, even 25% rate increases across the board. So if you're the guy that had no claims and they were looking to give you a 15% rate increase and you provided some of this documentation, would they maybe only give you a 10% rate increase? Yes, it's still an increase to you, so you don't feel like it's done anything, but that's where the difference is that you are getting credit for that. I would probably never preference it in the sense that you would see it go down below what you were paying last year for putting this into place, just because we're in a hard market. Now, in a soft market, when we have lots of competition, that's when, hey, we're going to give you a 10% discount. Now it might be a 12 or a 13% discount because you have all this extra documentation. So that's also beneficial, more beneficial in the soft market. Right now, it's just keeping insurance and keeping your rate as low as possible.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Are there any other questions for Damian? It was a lot of information, I'm sure a lot to process, but now while we have him at our beck and call, we might as well use him.
So Diane, I'll jump in here until somebody maybe throws up another question.
Okay.
So one of the things that came up recently was a California Fair Plan surcharge. So on this particular property, they were paying $17,000 for their insurance last year, and they got non-renewed. And a new company came in offering a policy for $78,000. So a heck of a hike. And we then shopped with the state fair plan. The state fair plan was $72,000, but $72,000, 32 of that was a surcharge for a fire brush zone, high fire brush zone. And it was subject to being removed after an inspection. And that inspection would happen typically 45 to 90 days after you bought the policy. So that's a huge chunk of money that this particular person has to decide, hey, am I going to gamble on this and hope that they remove the surcharge? And part of that then was, okay, what's the likelihood that they would remove it? And their criteria on that was, we want to see that the building on all four sides is clear of any, what we call forest, for 200 feet. However, we all have trees or bushes that are near a building or close to a building, more in the sense of landscaping versus like the forest. But if it's true landscaping, then they're saying, hey, we want to see that the limbs are trimmed up 20 feet off the ground, 10 feet from buildings, and really the pine needles and that fuel source underneath all the trees has been removed. So that'll give you an idea of, hey, if you're putting into place a plan, kind of what you would want to have in that plan. How high to cut them up. If you have lots of trees within 10 feet of your building, maybe we need to take out a few and make sure that we don't have a fuel load near the buildings. And if you're in deep forest type stuff, can you have a perimeter of 200 feet? Now that's for the California Fair Plan. So 200 feet is a pretty big swath of ground and potentially a lot of trees for some of the campgrounds that I've been in. However, most of the insurance industry, I would say, is normally 100 foot. They like to see 100 or 150 feet as defensible space. So hopefully that's helpful too, as you guys go through and attend.
Do you have another question? We've experienced huge increases across our portfolios. When do you expect new insurers to enter the market, taking advantage of the newly reset market with much higher premiums? I know there are very few insurers left to go for RV park owners in California.
Yeah, so California has always been limited. Typically, the main reason why we've been limited is the Failure to Maintain Act laws that are in place, which tend to get insurance companies not wanting to play on RV parks, mobile home parks, and that alike. But with that being said, typically the cycle in insurance is every 7 to 10 years. We go from hard to soft market. Now, the last time we really had a hard market like this was back in 2004. When that was after 9/11, and then all of a sudden the markets really hardened up. Everybody kind of tightened their belt, and then we started seeing some premium relief probably in 2008, 2009, and we really are just now seeing it. So it's been a little bit longer than the typical 7-year window. But if this is, let's call it 2 years in, or maybe even 3 years in, I would expect your premiums to continue to stay high or continue to rise at least over the next 3 years, 4 years. before we start to see that downward trend in getting other insurance companies in to battle out for the business. Did I lose you? Diane, are you there? Hello, hello.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was talking. I'm actually launching our poll right now. So if you wouldn't mind taking the poll, we did not have any additional questions. So we're going to go ahead and launch this poll. Please feel free to jump in, and you have about 2 minutes to go ahead and answer these 3 questions. This will help us provide future webinars. And again, Damian, thank you so much. I am really, really grateful for you to come on and bring all this information. This was a lot and something that hits our owners pretty hard. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and anybody, matter if you're clients of ours or not, feel free to call, ask questions, pick our brains, ask us for some of the risk management tools. We're really here to help you out in whichever way we can. And also too, hopefully this doesn't scare you. A lot of people always say, gosh, Damian, you have such great news. Thanks. But hopefully it educates you. And definitely where we can, we really want to try to have a plan for the future, so that there's some hope at the end of the tunnel, or light at the end of the tunnel. But feel free to call anytime. Will
do. And thank you everyone again for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions or need a copy of this webinar or the one on trees or any of the others, please let us know. We're happy to get those right out to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.